If you thought you had bad neighbors, think again. A late-night party is nothing compared to what neighbors in a small Madagascar village had to put up with. It started with a strange smell coming from what everyone thought was a vacant house. They all tried their best to ignore the smell, but they knew something was wrong. Eventually, the neighbors banded together to call in the professionals. At first, the residents in the neighborhood couldn't put a finger on where the smell was coming from. The smell was so strong that it felt like it was suffocating the entire area. Nobody wanted to point fingers either, so the issue just kept getting worse and worse. Finally, the neighborhood came together and discovered the smell was coming from a seemingly abandoned house. Now, they decided they should try to do something about it. The neighbors now had to figure out how to get in and solve the problem since the house was abandoned. They could enter illegally, but the smell was so rancid that they wanted to make sure there was no trouble inside. They considered calling the police, but they didn't want to bother them with what seemed like a silly question at the time. What was in the house that anyone would dare even go near it? Incredibly, the smell actually went away for a while, and the neighbors went about their regular business. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Just when everyone thought that their worries were over, the smell came back in full force. The neighbors even had a meeting to discuss the issue among themselves. At this point, everyone came to the conclusion that the smell was coming from the suspected house. However, they knew that they couldn't intrude by themselves, so they decided it was time to call the police. They told the officers that the smell was beginning to concern them, and the officers had an idea what it might be. After receiving the call, the police did their duty and investigated the house. The police didn't know what they were up against, so they made the necessary preparations. In case anything went awry, they brought in a team of specialists, including a medical examiner and a wildlife expert, among others. Sori Randrienja-Fizanaka was one of the members of the Wildlife Committee. Her department was one of the expert committees called upon by the police to help investigate the house. The department is usually called for instances regarding foul smells that are reported. Randrienja-Fizanaka is the head of the agency, and when she heard about the house, she went herself to investigate. The exact location of the house was located in the city of Toliara, a place on the southwest coast of Madagascar. The town is regarded as being incredibly beautiful as well as peaceful, where the residents coexist without any real troubles. Because of the city's reputation, the police had a hard time believing that the situation was a result of foul play. So, they called on Randrienja-Fizanaka just in case the smell might be animal-related. The environmental agency has been established for a very long time, so it's seen more than its fair share of insane incidents involving animals. They've dealt with animals of all different kinds, ranging from fearful kittens to fierce predators. Upon arriving at the home, they realized that the pungent smell was something that they couldn't put their finger on. Randrienja-Fizanaka was beside herself as to what it could be, so she prepared herself to enter. When the police and experts entered the house, the smell was so strong that many of them even became lightheaded. They were completely engulfed in the scent and had no choice but to keep moving deeper into the house. Still, they were yet to discover what the source actually was. As they made their way through the house, everyone stopped in their tracks when they heard a noise. Although the sound was not very loud, it was loud enough that everyone heard it. Everyone was on their guard now, almost sure that they weren't alone. As it turns out, there were other people on the property. Both parties were in complete shock. This only made the police and experts more confused than they originally were. When the team came face-to-face with the other people, they had shovels in their hands. Not only that, but they were digging holes as well. They appeared to be digging the holes as fast as they could and were surrounded by objects as well. The team didn't know what to make of it. Everything that they were expecting to find had just gone out of the window. Not only was the house not abandoned, but there were people there digging holes. When the police approached and asked what they were doing, unsurprisingly, they began acting strange. Now, everyone knew that something was definitely off about the whole situation. The diggers looked like they were trying to hide something, a look the cops could see right through. As soon as the police moved closer, they dropped their shovels as if they had been caught. Yet, the team still didn't quite understand what they would be guilty for. Yet, as if they knew they were in trouble, the diggers immediately put their hands up in the air. There was no point in running, so their only option was cooperating. The police then assumed that they did something bad and followed protocol. After they had arrested the suspects, the police were able to go back inside to see what the people had been hiding. So, the authorities headed back into the trashed interior of the house and braved the smell once again. Upon entering the rooms, it was clear that the interior of the house had been completely destroyed. Everything was falling apart, there was no light, and the ceilings and windows were covered in cobwebs. They were still looking around to find the source of the foul stench when they discovered something unbelievable. The floor was moving in certain areas of the house. At first, they were startled until they finally realized what they were looking at. Almost the entire floor was covered in tortoises that were packed in like sardines. There were so many that it looked like they made up the entire floor. The team was speechless as they stood in disbelief. However, Randrianja Fizanaka realized that these were no ordinary tortoises and had no clue where they had all come from. It was hard to look through the rest of the house because there were so many of them scattered everywhere. Randrianja Fizanaka knew there was something special about these tortoises, and she was right. The tortoises are rare and are known as radiated tortoises. They are rarely spotted in the wild, and only a limited number of the species call Madagascar home. They are known for their docile nature, as well as the unique markings on their shell. It started to make sense to Randrianja Fizanaka and the rest of the team why the people they arrested had all these animals. Because of their rarity, these creatures are often poached by criminals. Some people even eat them as a delicacy. On the less extreme side of things, people own them as pets. However, keeping these rare tortoises is against the law, but clearly, that isn't stopping anybody. There are a lot of underground operations that involve stealing the tortoises and illegally selling them. At this point, the species is almost extinct because of how they are treated. This instance was especially heinous. Randrianja Fizanaka immediately knew what she needed to do. She needed to get these tortoises out of the house as soon as possible and relocate them to a safe and suitable place. These animals had been horrendously treated, and it was more than likely that many of them were on the brink of death. It was going to be a lot of work and take a lot of time, but every second the tortoises remained in the house, they were in danger. At one point, this species of tortoises were thriving. However, in recent years, their numbers have dropped drastically. In the 1,990 seconds, it was estimated that their population was around 12 million, still a relatively low number. However, by 2010, their numbers had dropped below 6 million. Now, there are only an estimated 3 million. Although the team knew that there were countless tortoises in the house, they couldn't tell how many. In total, there were over 9,000 of them crammed in that small space. Although the tortoises had been living in appalling conditions and had been horribly mistreated, they were happy that they were able to recover so many. Because many of them were sickly, a lot of care was taken in transporting them to a safe place. Because they had found so many, the team was hopeful that they might be able to help bring their population numbers up. Unfortunately, not everything was as good as it seemed with the animals. Even though those helping with the tortoises were happy that they found them, they also learned the hard truth. Unfortunately, it was discovered that many of the tortoises wouldn't survive to the next week because many of them were severely ill. Most of them were very dehydrated, and although the vets did all they could do, they couldn't save them all. Even working around the clock, it was almost impossible to work with over 9,000 tortoises. The people who had called the police about the smell were in disbelief by what was found inside. Not only were they surprised that there was criminal activity occurring, but that there were 9,000 endangered tortoises inside. It's likely, if they had never called about the issue, the culprits would have got away with their crime. Of course, the story went viral with many activists raising awareness about all kinds of animals that are mistreated as the tortoises were. Although many people have been caught, arrested, and charged for animal cruelty, it still continues to happen every day. People become so controlled by greed and money that they forget animals are living beings just like us and deserve to be treated with respect. Unfortunately, the pet industry isn't always better, with many people calling for reform. Many people boycott the industry entirely because they think the animals aren't being treated as they should be, even if they are legal animals. All in all, around 8,000 of the tortoises survived the near-death experience. Now, the question is what to do with them. The team wasn't sure if they were ready to be released back into the wild, but they were also sure that no one facility could look after all 8,000 of them. After all, they had been through the worst, so now everyone just wanted them to be comfortable and happy. It was the least they could do for them. As it turns out, the tortoises couldn't be released back into the wild. This is so because they have spent much of their lives in that house. So, simply releasing them back into the wild would put them at risk of dying or being captured by poachers once again. Instead, they will be looked after closely by teams of experts who will ensure that they are safe and comfortable. Now, the tortoises can finally relax. A day, the tortoises have never had a better life. They get plenty of attention, food, water, and have a dedicated team that is beyond excited to work with them. At the moment, the first thing that the researchers are focusing on is how to get their population numbers back up. They have 8,000 tortoises to work with, so things are beginning to look up, not just for this group of tortoises, but the overall species. Not only are the people who illegally hoarded these poor turtles criminals, but they're animal abusers as well. Considering the extent of their crime, many people wanted to see them receive the justice they thought the criminals deserve. In court, they were judged harshly and received long prison sentences for their crimes. This also helped send a message to anyone else who might be involved in such activities. Now, the criminals will know what it's like to be held against their will in a small space.